Shalom Aleichem, welcome. I'm Lisa Newman, the Yiddish Book Center's Director of Publishing and Public Programs, and as always, it is my pleasure to welcome you for this evening's program, Russ and Daughters 100 Years of Appetizing, with Niki Russ Federman and Russ Tupper. Before we get started, a quick reminder that your audio and your video will be off throughout the program. You can send us your questions via the question panel located at the lower right of your screen. We ask that you keep questions short and refrain from comments so that we can try to get to everyone's questions this evening. I am delighted to welcome Niki Russ Federman and Russ Tupper, both fourth generation owners of the infamous, wonderful Russ and Daughters, and they are celebrating Russ and Daughters 100 Years of Appetizing with publication of their book. Welcome, Nikki, and welcome, Josh.
Thank you for having us. We're happy to be here.
Hi,
Love,
Lisa. Hi, everyone.
Lovely to have you here. Only thing that would be better is if we were at your place sitting at the table.
It is a bit of a tease to be talking about bagels and lox and babka and herring and then, not be eating it. So forgive us.
Yes, we'll forgive you because you do so much to feed us always. So this will just be a tease for everybody.
Well, if everyone was smart, they've ordered and are sitting at home with their Russ and Daughters in front of them.
Yes. And I can attest to the fact that here in the rural reaches where you find me, it does come to my doorstep. And I happily welcome it. So again, thanks for joining me. So I thought it'd be really fun to sort of do a little bit of a walkthrough about Russ and Daughters. I'm going to share some, if I may, some images of Russ and Daughters and ask you to speak a little bit. Let's get started by talking a little bit about the history of Russ and Daughters. Here's our first slide. And this is what it looks like now. Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, maybe I'll just show the slides and you can just kind of comment on them, yeah?
Yeah.
Sure. So that's the man who started it all. That's our great-grandfather, Joel Russ, or Yoel Rus. And here he is, in his shop, in his suit. But our story starts with his arrival in New York years before he ever had a store. He came in 1907. Was a street peddler for years, selling herring on the Lower East Side, first out of a barrel, then a horse and wagon, a push cart. And then we date Russ and Daughters from when he was able to open a shop. And it might have looked, this isn't it, but well, this actually is East Houston Street in 1929. And if you were to if you were able to zoom in on the left side, you would see the shop underneath where that white globe light is. And the store, as you saw in the first picture, that it's still there to this day.
I think I'm missing one of the stores, sorry. So here we have family, yes?
Yeah, this was a wedding, Hattie, the eldest daughter's wedding, who's obviously in the middle, and then Joel Russ and Bella Russ, his wife, and then our grandmother on the far right and Aunt Ida on the far left.
So it says here 1933, and quite a thing to have named it after his daughters. You may want to speak a little bit about that history?
Yeah, so as I said, the shop was opened in 1914, and it had a few other names. One was actually, if in that street photo we saw, if we had zoomed in on the awning, you would see that it said J. Russ National Appetizing, which I find so funny because there was nothing national about what he was doing. He was selling sustenance to the poor Jews of the Lower East Side. His reach was like 4 square blocks. And another one was Russ's cut rate appetizers because there were many other appetizing stores just on the Lower East Side, so he had to be cut rate. But in
His first attempt to set us apart from the other appetizing stores, cut rate
yeah,
appetizing.
yeah, he
His
was good
second
with the
attempt,
names.
his second attempt worked a lot better, I think, which was changing the name to Russ and Daughters. when his daughters were working in the business in, I mean, the 40s?
Well, no, I mean, well, in 33 he changed the name to Russ and Daughters, and we're very proud to be the first business in the country that has and daughters in its name. And if you think about it, in the year 2026, it's still actually quite rare to see that. But not only did he change the name, but he made his daughters his partners. And it was very controversial at the time. You know, we like to remember him now as this pioneering feminist. But you know, to be honest, like if there had been a son, it would have been Russ and Son. Um, but that being said, he knew that he would take some flack for this, and he did. There were people, you know, who said who couldn't understand why he would sullen his good, you know, business reputation with such a name. I've met customers who are, you know, because we have generations of relationships with our customers. I've talked to people who are, you know, in their 90s who have told me that growing up, they just always assumed that there was a Mr. Russ and a Mr. Daughters. Um, yeah.
He was also a savvy businessman. I mean, he to do that, what may have been against the grain, but it did set us apart from the other shops.
Yeah.
And this photo is interesting. This is actually the 50th anniversary of Russ and Daughters, a party we had in the store,
Mhm.
except it wasn't actually 50 years. They were concerned Joel Russ wasn't going to make it to the 50th, so they had it a few years earlier,
Yeah.
and that's what we're looking at.
And our grandmother, Josh and I have the same, share the same grandmother, and she's the one on the far right with the big hat, and that was Anne. She was the youngest of the three daughters, so it was Hattie, Ida, and Anne.
So I'm going to jump in every once in a while and just ask you a
Yeah.
question. What do you remember of your grandmother being there? Or do you have memories?
Oh yeah. I mean, our grandmother was around our whole childhood. She passed away, I don't know, 10 years ago. So she's around for a long time. I have a very different childhood than Nikki. I wasn't brought up in the store. I was brought up upstate on an ashram. But we did come into the city, and our grandmother Anne was really the matriarch of our family, and a powerful figure, a powerful force in her own right. But did work in the store for nearly her whole life until she moved out to Florida, and then would even come back to help out for the holidays when Nikki's parents were running the business, into her 70s, I think.
Nikki, did
Yeah.
you go behind the counter with her? Did you work, nibble?
Well, I mean, by the time I was a kid, and was very much a shop kid because my parents were the third generation of Russ and Daughters. So by that point, our grandmother had already retired to Florida, as one does. But she would come back every year for the high holidays, which are, you know, some of our busiest weeks of the year at Russ and Daughters, and would come to work. But by that point, she was, you know, she wasn't made for standing on the counter at that point. So I remember her being in the back of the shop in this office that literally was a converted closet. And you know, sort of this is you know, nothing was done by computer. But it was, you know, she was on the calculator. She would be, you know, tallying up the orders and adjusting the weights, you know, from a half a pound of Gaspé Nova to 0.53, and then she'd change the amounts. And so I just have this, but I was always struck that she would be kind of doing this busy, you know, work, and then a customer would, an old customer who she knew would be in the shop, and she would immediately just like, you know, pop out and go into the front, and there were just these, you know, hugs and conversations, and it was great to see that those relationships were still there.
Well, I mean, it's sort of an institution, if I may. For those of us who grew up either in or near New York, I remember my brother loves dried apricots. And I have such a memory of walking in, and you have or had these baskets, right, of dried apricots. And it was always my brother would just be so excited to be there. Of course, I liked the smoked salmon myself.
There are
The,
still the two sides to, to the store. There's the appetizing counter with all the smoked fish for you, Lisa, and then, what we call the candy side to this day.
Mhm.
We still call it the candy side, even though people don't buy 2 or 3 pounds of sucking candies at a time like they used to. But with those dried fruits are still in the window, just like
Hmm.
your brother would have remembered them.
So this leads me to the question, what is an appetizer shop?
Well, we say appetizing
Okay.
as a noun,
Hmm.
and an appetizing shop, an appetizing store, or the store as we call it, is a store that sells smoked and cured fish and is able to sell dairy alongside of it. I think originally these appetizing shops, like this photo you're looking at, was really just smoked fish. And then the next door down was Ben's Dairy, who sold the cream cheese and the farmer cheese. And then next to that was Moisha's Bakery. So it was separated as, these little mom and pop shops, very specialized. But we, in more recent years, well, not recent years now, a long time ago, brought the dairy, the cream cheese, and the baked goods into the shop. So
Mhm.
advertising today this is a New York tradition. Um, is simply put, it's the stuff you could put on a bagel, cream cheese, lox, sable, sturgeon, and then herring, and is born out of the kosher tradition, which we never were. Even our great grandfather didn't run a kosher establishment. I think what much to his wife's chagrin. It was open on Saturdays.
Mhm.
Uh, but the deli, which is now more popular and more understood, was the meat side of the kosher tradition, and appetizing stores were the dairy and smoked and cured fish side.
And
But
on the lower, on our, where the shop is on East Houston Street, and it's not a coincidence that a block apart, you have Russ and Daughters, and then you have Katz's. So you have the appetizing store and the delicatessen. Um, because that's, people would shop at these separate establishments. And the word, and it's so appropriate for the Yiddish Book Center, a community, the origin of the word appetizing comes from the word Vorspeise. So appetizer, because and so it's actually totally appropriate, Lisa, that you did say appetizer, because that is the origin of the word. These were foods that were, because they were smoked, cured, pickled, they were ready to be eaten, like an appetizer. So when you would come home from shul or from a shiva, or you'd have a bris, uh, these foods were just easy to put out and eat right away. And most likely, what happened is that um, a Yiddish speaker, like someone like our great grandfather was trying to translate Vorspice, and instead of saying appetizer, said appetizing, and that stuck. And that was, the word has not s- become part enmeshed in the, common lexicon the way that delicatessen or deli has, right? These days, like, the corner store is a deli. People mistakenly refer to Russ and Daughters as a deli. Uh, but that's why we really felt strongly that the name of the cookbook needed to have the word appetizing in it. So we're kind of like, the trying to reinvigorate this word in common usage.
Teach people. And now it's everyone's responsibility on this to share that knowledge
Yeah. Don't
and
call
to
us a
tell
deli.
and to tell people not to call us a deli, please.
You have our commitment to
Yeah.
that. I
We've
think
all
at
been
a
initiated.
right. The first time I met you many years ago, I think that was one of the questions I had because
Mhm.
it was a new term, but now it makes sense when you connect it with the Yiddish, which I'm familiar with, although I don't speak Yiddish. Um, so I'm going to go on. Of course, I get a lot of your herring updates in my email. Talk a little bit about herring, that history, and the picture, if you would.
Well,
I love this photo.
yeah,
Just
the arch to herring.
yeah, and the like popcorn buckets that we're putting the herring. Like look at the size of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are buying
And
lots
the
of herring.
poetry. I mean, through these portals, the finest herrings pass the lone lordly touch that comes out of the sea. I mean, Josh, you and I need to up our game here.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, herring is what started it all. Schmaltz herring specifically. That's what Joel Russ sold for, first just out of a barrel. Why Schmaltz herring? This was before refrigeration. So a Schmaltz herring is a fatty herring that's preserved in salt and oil, so it could just sit in a large barrel, and then he would wrap it up in the previous day's Forvitz, Yiddish newspaper. That was his packaging, and and then also, herring was a very cheap but very nutritious
Mhm.
food that was not just sustenance for the waves of other Eastern European Jewish immigrants on the Lower East Side, but it was also a taste of home. So I think it fed people's um, uh, emotional void of feeling, that sort of in this new world, but being able to, but feeling comforted by having this connection to the taste of home. So herring is still very much, you go into any Russ and Daughters, you're going to find a showcase, one of the showcases full of herrings with different sauces. And herring is now, believe it or not, it's like totally chic. Just last week, to actually throw, and you're all invited if you're in New York in mid-July, we actually throw a fabulous herring party. So if you like herring, you will be with your people. And and
Herring and booze.
herring, booze, and it's timed with this herring that we import from the Netherlands. That is the polar opposite of a schmaltz herring. The new catch herring it's almost more like if you like sushi or sashimi, you would love this new catch Holland herring. And last year, the New York Times actually did a whole like full page profile of our herring party in, believe it or not, it was in the styles section of the New York Times. So yeah, who
It's
knew? We
that good of a
were we
party.
were we're that stylish and it's that good of a party.
Which then begs the question for you, which I was going to get to later. So, I mean, I doubt there were many varieties of herring back in the early days. Is that true? I mean, now it's how you've evolved the store, how you've built on tradition, and how you make it so that it works in the 21st century, but it still draws from its history and the kinds of foods that we all gravitate to because of tradition. How challenging is that? Or fun?
Um, we have a great base of all of these traditional foods and the schmaltz herring and the Swedish matjes herring, roll mops. We have this wide assortment of really traditional foods that we don't really attempt to change that much. We sort of stick to tradition as much as possible. That's not to say we aren't open to bringing new things in. For example, wasabi roe, which was
Mhm.
actually before Nikki and Mai's time, but maybe 30 years ago came in and is a great accompaniment to what we sell. But just the we see ourselves as a business that really upholds tradition of these foods. And that's very important to who we are and how we do business. Um, So it is a bit of a wait, and we certainly will debate over a new offering or trying to bring
Mm.
something new in. Um, but we also feel very proud, and we started making our own bagels in 2014, and with all of the bagels in New York growing bigger and bigger and bigger and turning into something sort of different than a traditional New York bagel, we knew that we had to make a traditional bagel, and it hasn't always been easy. People are like, "Why are your bagels so small?" Like, well, they're supposed to be small. That's the way they've always been. So we stick to tradition as much as possible, and mind you, we still try to stay connected to um, the reality of today and the current situation and what people are looking for today. But we have this deep-seated connection to history and the tradition of these foods that really guides us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think, in everything that we do, we're constantly trying to do two seemingly incongruous things, uh, uh, which is trying to stay the same, preserve tradition,
Mhm.
maintain continuity, and then also keep it feeling relevant and so that it resonates and excites new generations. And that applies to everything we do, and certainly with the food, as Josh said, like we are still kind of keepers of what a traditional New York bagel is, even when we face some resistance and to that. Like you said, Lisa, there used to be just, schmaltz herring and pickled herring, and now we have all these different kinds of herrings. There used to be just belly locks and Nova. And now if you look at our smoked salmon showcase, you're gonna, some people get overwhelmed because they didn't even realize that there were so many different kinds. It's like walking in, into a wine store and realizing, oh, there's not just like red and white. So but what has been so wonderful to me is in a way this sort of the breadth of our offerings and the foods that we make and serve and how it's evolved sort of mimics the way in which Russ and Daughters and our reach has evolved and widened. The Russ and Daughters was from its inception and for many, many years a very specialty store, right? It was a Jewish food store run by a Jewish family serving Jewish customers, Jewish food. Um, and now it's really transcended that. We are still that, and we've transcended that to being just a very New York place. And in that sense, there's sort of this general feeling that like it belongs to everyone, and people come in and they have this sense of ownership. And um, whether this is like part of their New York or they're tourists and they're coming for the first time, but somebody said, or they read it in a book, like this is Russ and Daughters is a place you have to go to taste New York. Or Scandinavian customers come in and they see the herrings and they say like, that's our food.
Right. I have a friend from Holland who I have to always bring back herring for. But yeah, I mean, I think that authenticity is so much what you're about, but you aren't dragged down by it. You you're doing something pretty wonderful for all of us. You're holding to tradition, you're holding to authenticity, but you're open to, okay, there are a few more versions of this. Let's let's try it out. Um, so here we go. This is a little bit backwards, but that's the street, right? Yeah. Okay. I love this picture.
Oh.
Um, this is-
So that's our grandmother Anne, who's at the scale. And that scale, notice, just we still have the weights. Back when, some of the scales you had to put like a half pound or pound weight on one side. But this particular scale, we still have it. We don't use it. But here she is weighing some fish. I love the guy with the top hat. And behind her, she was probably, I don't know, maybe 16, 17 in that picture.
Oh,
And
Yeah,
yeah.
so like,
older sister Hattie is behind her. It looks like, with like a pencil behind the ear. And if you know our store on East Towson Street and you know how small it is today, look at how small it was back then. It was
smaller.
even smaller. Um, so yeah.
And I love the woman peeking over the counter that you can just see a part of her face.
Yeah,
Yeah, anybody who's ever been and is waiting their turn knows that you're just like, oh, please, yes.
this was a
Exactly.
very, very exposed counter. Like people
Yeah.
could reach over and smack you if they needed to.
Yeah. Or just grab the food themselves. This would not, D Department of Health would not approve of this,
No.
these days.
And this also is, I'm sure it has a story.
Oh, yes. So this is Hattie, the eldest of the daughter, and she is looking with such fondness at what this fish, it's called kapchunka. And these were whitefish that were air dried. They were hung on strings and dried without being eviscerated. So they were not gutted. Um, and it was a little bit like the Jewish version of Japanese fugu, like blowfish. If you didn't know what you were doing and you didn't do it in a very sanitary way, it could be lethal. And sadly, this is what happened in the 80s. There were a number of fatalities, not at Russ Daughters, out in like Brighton Beach or Canarsie, but uh the feds came, FDA came in and said no more kapchunkas. But
Yeah. Yeah.
those hooks that you see the
Mhm.
kapchunkas hanging on, those hooks are still in the shop. It's right when you enter. If you look to your right, you'll see that bar, but now these days it holds baskets of bagels.
Mhm.
But that being said, one of the kind of defining features of our shop are these shelves with hand painted light boxes with different words. And one of the first light boxes still says Kapchunkas. So we definitely have our fair share of confused customers sometimes. They're like, what?
Yeah.
Kapchunka?
Hattie,
And can I get it?
Hattie, seen here was known for her salesmanship, and her loving, adoring look at that fish was part of her game.
Mhm.
She's like, "Oh, look how beautiful this fish is! Like, I'm not sure I want to sell this to you, like." But she pulled it off perfectly. And Nikki's father tells this great story when he came into the business. He was attempting to you know, uh, step up his craft of salesmanship and was slicing some fish and held it up to a customer. It's like, oh, look how beautiful these slices are. Look how beautiful this is. I'm not sure I want to sell it to you. And the customer's like, do me a favor. Don't fall in love with the merchandise.
True. Only Hattie could pull that off.
Yeah.
And now we're skipping forward to the
Oh,
fourth generation.
oh.
And of course, I have to ask, this was a big commitment. It must have been a major decision for you. And how many families out there have fourth generation people holding to a family business?
Uh,
Congratulations. Mazel
Thank
tov.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very rare. We're in a very small club, so to speak, because less than 1% of family businesses make it to a fourth generation.
Mhm.
And here we are. This is us sitting in our restaurant, Russ Daughters Cafe, which we opened in 2014, which happened to be the 100th anniversary of Russ Daughters, but we did not, we're not that strategic. It just worked out. And it was a big deal for us individually. We each have kind of had our own journey of realizing that this was the work and the path that we wanted to do separately. And then coming together, realizing that not only did we, want to work together, but that we had ambitions to try to, to do more with it. And it's a bit crazy to think that, I mean, we were a bit crazy. I guess we still are crazy because we've had this, I guess, chutzpah to think that, back then, neither one of us knew anything about owning or running a restaurant. I mean, I had never even worked as like a server in a restaurant. And we thought that we could, if we, that we could do it. And what a crazy thing, but it worked out. And similarly, at some point, we realized that in order to preserve what a real bagel is, or bialys, or rye bread, like we had no choice but to start, to become bakers and do this ourselves and start our own bakery. And we did that. And so, every once in a while, it's nice when we kind of sit down, like in this picture, and kind of
Mhm.
have a moment of like a really, like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
did
did
that.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then there you are in front of the store. I also have to say, being somebody who loves graphics, all of your merchandising, everything about it, it's it's perfection. The sign
Thank you.
is just such a landmark on Houston Street.
Yeah. A funny story about that, Lisa. I think it was like 2008, right, Josh? That the
7, 8. Yeah.
sign, that neon sign, which goes back to probably the early 60s, it needed serious repair, and it could only,
Serious repair. It was like hanging on to the
yeah,
building by like two bolts or something. It was like nuts when we figured
yeah,
it out. It was like,
yeah.
whoa.
And every, if it rained, just like a few drops of rain, the whole thing would like short circuit. And so first of all, it was hard to find even like neon fabricators who wanted to work on it. A lot of them backed off and said, like, this is too old and too special. We don't want to mess it up. But anyway, we finally found um, the right let there be neon. They're amazing. Anyway, the sign had to come down in order to go to the workshop. And but we were ready. We had made a large vinyl sign to replace it. But it took maybe just like an hour between the neon coming down and the vinyl going up. And this is 2008. So it's like before, people were really like before
No
social
social media.
media,
Yeah.
but somehow somebody was going by in a taxi and saw the sign coming down, and immediately assumed that like Russ Daughters was going out of business. And word spread like wildfire. I don't know how. And we were starting to get
Blogs.
people, blogs, calls. People were like rushing over, and people were coming in sometimes with like tears in their eyes. People brought flowers like for like a memorial to the store. Um, it was both comical, but also very, very touching,
Yeah.
to see the kind of immediate reaction that people had with just the thought that Russ and Daughters might not be here.
Yeah, it's also amazing to me that you still have the same storefront given real estate in New York. So I'm going to go on. Now we have the cookbook, and
Mhm.
we have, I was very upset with you because when I was looking at these slides, it was before lunch and it was cruel. Just cruel. Um, let's talk. I mean, we've got borscht on one side, we've got the, white
Black and white
rice
cookies.
like cookie. All right, these are traditions. How did you decide what goes into the cookbook? And do any of these, would you say, have any kind of a twist or an imprint from you?
So the cookbook was interesting because Nikki and I have thought about and discussed this for many years. Nikki's father did a cookbook 12, 13 years ago now.
Well, more
Not
like
a
a
cookbook.
memoir.
It was like a memoir with a few recipes. So it wasn't the right time for a while after that. And to be honest, the store itself, the appetizing store, there's not a ton of recipes. You know, we make salads, we make this, but it's a lot of smoked fish and caviar and herring that maybe there's sauce recipes and things. But so when we opened the restaurant, it really sort of hit us that we needed to do a cookbook. And we had some, you know, we were open during the pandemic, but we couldn't really hang out anywhere. You know, we'd let two people in the store at a time. So Nikki and I were in the office a lot. It's sitting there hoping no one got too sick and really dove into the idea of the cookbook and started properly working on it. So a lot of our recipes are from the restaurant.
Mhm.
You know, now that we have a restaurant, we have a whole array of dishes that we put in. Um, and we made this, you know, one of the biggest challenges for us was to figure out how to format the cookbook, what comes first, how it's organized. And we sort of determined it should follow sort of the history of Russ and Daughters, but then how the business developed. So the original store, the appetizing store, their recipes are first, or the history of the business, and then the appetizing store, and then the cafe, and then the bakery. So it sort of followed how we grew as a business. And we cut out a few recipes. I can't even think of any off the top of my head. Um, but a lot of the stuff that we do is in there. There's not very many that are out there. I know we've heard from a few people that were upset of some that we cut out. I just can't think of what they were.
Prep law.
Prep log. Um,
Um,
and you know, we still stick to pretty traditional ideas. You know, our borscht.
Mhm.
That's that was a picture of our winter borscht, which is the chunky version. Then we have a summer borscht, which may be nouveau-ish, newer. That's blended and smooth and served cold.
Mhm.
The but the baked goods are really we really try to stick to the traditional idea of what these things are, particularly with people doing, you know, babkas that are with laminated dough and croissant babkas or
or like matcha babkas, and
right.
we kind of see ourselves in that regard as the torchbearers of the platonic form of what
Yeah,
these foods should be.
right.
And then we're happy to see other people like put their own, add their own influences to it.
Mhm.
We did go a little wild with the egg creams, no?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, so the when we were planning the restaurant and the menu and the drink menu, we knew of course there was going to be chocolate egg cream, of course. Um, but then we started ideating on other egg creams. And I said, let's do a buxa egg cream. I had been looking for some way to put buxa on the menu. I don't follow, yeah, what is buxa exactly? So buxa is spelled Buxar, but don't you can ignore the R. And it's dried carob pods. So it's these brown, desiccated, crescent-shaped, hard pods of carob. And growing up as a kid, coming to the store, there used to be on the what we call the candy side, there was this barrel, which as a kid felt like it was bigger than me. And I remember, these older men standing around this wooden barrel that emitted this like very rich, smoky, sort of chocolatey tobacco kind of aroma.
Mhm.
And they would sit around like gnawing on buxa, on these dried carob pods. And it was sort of like the Jewish water cooler. That was like where you kibitzed around the buxa barrel. And so
It
I,
keeps you regular.
yeah, yeah, that's another benefit of buxa. Um, and so I was so excited when I was like, when the light bulb went off, like, oh, we can make a syrup out of buxa and then do a buxa egg cream. And I thought so many people were just gonna have this like, Madeline moment, with the Proustian moment of like, having the buxa but it turns out that Lisa, you are not alone. Most people were like, buxa? What? What is that? And at the end of the day, what people really want is a chocolate egg cream. And we also thought that we realized we had to avoid the temptation to kind of fancify the egg cream. We tried, we experimented with, you know, like fancy chocolates and making our own syrup for it. And then we realized, no, a chocolate egg cream can only be done with Fox's You Bet
Yeah.
syrup.
This idea that we want to stick to the tradition of these things comes back to like this taste memory and nostalgia of what how you remember it tasting. And if you're using some other chocolate, it's not ever going to be the same.
Well, you are truly good custodians. I mean, you've tried it and you realize, you know what? This is what we want.
Right.
I was once sitting in there having a bowl of matzo ball soup and I was in a kind of funky mood and I was reminded of my grandparents and so I got a little weepy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And sitting next to me looked over and said, that must be really good soup.
I'll
No,
have what she's having.
right. Yeah, but it was like, no,
Right.
it transported me.
Oh,
So, well, there we
Ah,
go. And we'll
speaking
end
there we
of,
go.
it. It's a
There we go.
classic, right?
And you're also not alone in, getting verklempt, that I mean for us that's the biggest compliment. And it's also a big compliment when people tell us like, okay, it's almost as good as my grandmother's, And for us, it's like, yeah, because we don't want to take away the memory of your bubby's matzo ball soup or kasha but if we can be just under, number two, that's the best.
I'll let you
well,
go.
how about
Number one.
how about when it's too good, like the Maggie Gyllenhaal story of the kasha.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't like it. I was like, you don't? She's like, my grandmother made kasha. It was never very good, but that's what I want. And
Mhm.
this tastes too good.
Just send it back. Uh, the one other thing I want to ask you about before we open it up to questions, um, the art of the slice. I mean, you've got people there. Requires a lot of training to be it's transparent, I'm not talking about transparency or whatever in terms of seeing through the fish. Can you just quickly talk about that art?
Sure. I mean, it's a very important part of what we do. Hand slicing salmon uh, makes it better. And if you're slicing it well, texturally, it's a very different experience than a poorly sliced piece of fish. And yes, it takes a lot of practice. And when I started, I learned to slice myself, but after I learned to slice and trying to work with trainees coming on, learning to slice, it sort of tore me up a little bit. I was like, oh, you're just hacking these fish up. But that's what it takes. It takes us putting these new people in front of, like, it takes time and practice. So they are, you know, not slicing very well for a while, and we're putting the chunks of salmon into smoked salmon tartare and trying to use it wherever we can. And it hurt me, but we've come to realize that that's what has to be done, and that's part of the training process. And the ultimate um, slice, you should be able to read the New York Times through.
Mhm.
And this is a nice picture showing that it is transparent
Yeah.
if sliced correctly.
Oh,
That's why I had to show
there actually is a picture in the cookbook of a slice with the New York Times behind it because and that wasn't planned, but while we were, doing the food photography, which was a whole 9 days of just, it was this mad choreographed experience, of like making the recipes and timing it so you could, take the picture anyway, but there was some downtime and we were talking about explaining to our photographers about the litmus test that Josh described of being able to see the New York Times through a slice. And then, we had the idea, well, like what if we actually showed that in a picture? But we then were scrambling looking for a newspaper and, the most recent one we had at work because we save old, like
Mhm.
articles and things about Russ Daughters was from like 12 years ago. So we had to kind of position it so you wouldn't really see the date because we thought it might be, distracting. But yeah, it's an art that it's something that looks when you look at a trained slicer like the folks on our counter, it looks so easy. But it's really, as Josh said, a craft that takes a lot of time. And, just today I was giving a pep talk to a new employee, um, to say to let them know, like, you don't worry, don't get in your own way,
Yeah.
thinking that this is something that you should be able to do well in
Yeah.
the next few days. This is going to take weeks and weeks. So like we're patient. You have to be patient with yourself. Uh,
Yeah. A lot of the training is helping these employees not to be too critical and harsh on themselves. So it takes time and grit, and you need to understand that you're gonna get there, but don't beat yourself up about it. It's a weird thing.
It's beautiful to watch. It's like choreography or something.
and it's even and it's so relaxing once you know how to do it. It's very you almost get into you get into a flow state when you're slicing a lot.
Zen and the Art of Salmon Slicing.
Yeah, that's our next
That's your
The
next
next
book.
next
book.
book.
Yeah.
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 Speaking of which, there we go.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open it up to questions. Bear with me while I'm going to exit this for a second so that I can get to the question panel. Okay. Oh, um, okay. So, okay. Is the salmon smoked or hot smoked? And where is the smoking done? Is that a trade
So
secret?
we sell both cold smoked and hot
Mhm.
smoked salmon. The salmon that you saw just before being sliced is cold smoked, and our hot smoked salmon is called kippered salmon, which means baked in Yiddish. Um, and we've worked with local smokehouses for many, many years. Um, so Brooklyn, upstate, very, very local. And we're getting deliveries of smoked salmon daily.
Mhm.
And that's an
So
important part of what we do.
there's actually an old pollution law from over 100 years ago that's still on the books, which prohibits the commercial smoking of fish in New York City. And no one's bothered to change this law. So from early days, like, our family has had our specs, like we, have worked with as Josh said, constellation of smokehouses, they have our specs. And then what has kept us with the quality that we have is that we we stay independent and we're just choosing the best of what we want for our specs and then we reject the rest. And so that's how we've, maintained the quality. And that also, we move through it so quickly that it's just the freshest it can be.
So one of the questions relates to slicers. What's the average number of years of experience, or how long do people? It's a lifelong career?
Yeah, I mean, we just over COVID, we had a couple retirements. We had Jose, who was with us for 46 years. Herman was with us for 42, I want to
Two.
say.
Yeah.
Um, we like to joke that if you've worked at Russ Daughters for 5 years, you're still a novice, you're still in training. So we've been really lucky that we have some of these, people who have been with us for decades. But then also, obviously, that's not really the professional world these days. People don't stay in one job for their whole career like they might have before. And so there's an interesting mix of, young kids coming in who are learning this with like no previous knowledge, and then other people, who predate me and Josh, and have worked with our grandparents.
Um, so I have to tell you that somebody on here um, says that they always got, and I'm going to say it incorrectly, baksa,
Buxa?
baksa
Bucks.
on Tu B'Shvat.
Yes.
So there,
Yes,
there's somebody who would go to that barrel.
yay. Team Buxa.
Um, do you make egg creams the quote Bronx way or the quote Brooklyn way in terms of the order in which you put in the syrup, milk, and seltzer? Or do customers voice their strong preferences about this? First I've heard.
Interesting. We do the chocolate, milk, and then the seltzer. And to be honest, I'm not sure which way that is.
Yeah, maybe someone here knows. Enlighten us. We just do it the Lower East Side way.
Exactly.
Exactly. Um, I'm going to ask these last two questions, which are sort of related to one another. Well, let's go with the first one, which is, what do you think your great grandfather would have made of all of this that you still are sitting there on Houston Street going strong?
I think about one of the original names he had of his shop, J. Russ National Appetizing.
Mm.
And that maybe, although he didn't see it in his lifetime, maybe as they say, he was manifesting um, that his shop would not just survive but thrive. I think he would be quelling to know that his great grandchildren um, are doing this work, and that we chose to do this work.
Mhm.
For him, this was just the first thing. I think, just what he did to survive when he got to New York. For his children, they didn't have a choice in the matter. That was the expectation, that they would come and work because that's how the family, again, how the family survived. So I think the fact that Joel Russ's great-grandchildren, we've been given every opportunity and to do whatever we wanted to do with our lives, and the fact that we chose to do this, I think he would be very, very proud and amazed that people come from literally all over the world to Russ and Daughters every day.
Well, tonight we have somebody in France who has written in, and somebody in London who says they're coming next month. So yes, you have a huge reach, which leads me to remind people the book is out, Russ and Daughters, a cookbook, 100 Years of Appetizing. It is absolutely as delicious to look at it as it is to yield the recipes and eat them at dinner. And also, as I mentioned earlier in the show, don't forget that you can order, if you can't go to the shop, which you should, it's a pilgrimage, you can get delivery, correct?
Yes, not internationally, except I do see this person from London, Ontario.
Oh,
Um,
you read your screen is bigger than mine. Okay.
yeah, that it's possible to ship to Canada. I'm not sure about London, Ontario, but I know we ship to Toronto, but we do not ship internationally beyond Canada.
Yeah. But every day, I mean, just, coming up on Monday with Passover, we have already probably close to 800 orders, that are going out, both like local orders, but then also all over the country. And just today I was looking at the list and the names and I mean, going to all 50, every state and we used to know all of our customers by name, and now I'm excited when I know a name, I recognize a name. So yeah, are we've stayed true to we try to stay very much still connected to our roots and the place of origin, which is the Lower East Side, and you can all come visit us there. Or you can visit us in Brooklyn at Russ Daughters Brooklyn. You can come watch us make the bagels and braid the challah and pull the babkas out of the oven. But if you can't come to us, we can literally come to your doorstep.
Mhm.
Well, thank you both for taking time, and I know it's a busy season, and for all you've done and all you continue to do, and uh, keep it going. So thank you again for joining us. Everybody, grab a cookbook, order some good food, and celebrate tradition.
Thank
Thank
you for having
you.
us. Good night, everyone.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. I want to thank our producer, who is behind the scenes helping us with everything, Oren Koffler. And I would also like to thank all of our members out there this evening who make all of our ongoing work possible. Learn more about how you can join and support the work of the Yiddish Book Center at yiddishbookcenter.org/donate. Check out our upcoming events, which are both virtual and live at the Yiddish Book Center, as well as cities across the country. And don't forget to check out Yidstock, which is happening once again at the Yiddish Book Center, July 9 through 12. Look forward to seeing you at the center. Come visit, come explore our exhibition, and tune in again and check us out, yiddishbookcenter.org/events. Until then, good night and thanks for joining us.